Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays in Stores podcast, which you can find right here on the Core Store Media Network. My name is Kanaye, and we got a lot to talk about on today's episode. Of course, the Huskies suffered an unfortunate loss, 71-67, against the number 3 ranked Arizona Wildcats this past Wednesday night. I do think overall it was a really strong effort from a team that was down 2 starters. You also need to give Arizona and Tommy Lloyd a lot of credit. Jaden Bradley is a stud. Tommy Lloyd's game plan defensively was really, really great. I mean, they just were really able to manhandle UConn in the paint and pull down a lot of rebounds. And overall, I do think there's both good and bad. And I'm going to get into, of course, all the takeaways that I had from Wednesday night's game, as well as previewing their upcoming matchup against Illinois on Black Friday at MSG. I do know they are playing on Sunday against Bryant. However, I just, it's one of those bye games that is hopefully a situation where UConn can kind of get right and address some of the issues they had, or I should say that came up against Arizona. But before we get into all of that today, please engage with the videos you see on this channel in any way you can, whether it's liking, subscribing, or just telling other people about what we do here at the Court Storm. All goes a long way in influencing YouTube's algorithm and getting more people to watch our videos. So let's get right into it. I think a good place to start is just an update with the injuries. Of course, Braylon Mullins, he's still in the process of returning. I think I've came on here and said before that it's believed that he should be back sooner than expected. I'm hearing there's a good chance he can make his return for the Kansas or the Florida game in the back half of the non-conference stretch for UConn before Big East play begins. In terms of Terrace suffered an ankle sprain in the later stretches of the BYU game. Of course, he finished that game in Boston last Saturday night. But I think a lot of that is attributed to him just running on the fumes of adrenaline. And it was something that the staff saw as precautionary in wanting to sit him and not risk losing him for a longer duration of time, because he is very vital to this UConn team being able to go where they believe they can go and where a lot of people, including myself, believe they can go still, even after the loss against Arizona. So, of course, it's unfortunate not having Terrace this past Wednesday. I think he really would have made a difference considering UConn got out-rebounded by 20. 43 rebounds to 23, if I'm not mistaken, in favor of Arizona. So I think you lose your most physical player, your post threat offensively. It's tough to win without that. And the fact that UConn was able to make it as close as they did at the end, I think was really impressive. And there's a lot of good to take away from that. Outside of that, I think two of my other big takeaways were you got to make free throws. UConn shot 50% at the line on Wednesday night. Eric Robbie did not shoot the ball well at the line. Dwayne Caroma did not as well. AK missed, I want to say, I forget if it was one or two front ends. He got on one-on-one opportunities going to the charity stripe. But again, you left a lot of points on the board there, and you make your free throws. You're probably in a better position. You might even win the game by 5 to 6 points if you hit your free throws. So that was definitely something that they need to improve on, because they haven't shot well from the free throw line really at all to start the year. It's almost consistently gone down game to game. So that's hopefully something that gets addressed going forward. The other thing was, I think the lack of fight and physicality at times, really throughout most of the game until UConn was able to go on their run following that 13-point deficit they faced when it was 53-40, again in favor of Arizona. Hurley had a quote about it at the end of the game where he said that, men, they have to run to fights. They can't stay back. They can't, I forget exactly what he said, but he essentially was, I think, calling out some of the star players on this team where you have a couple guys that are competing to be on all Big East teams, all American teams at the end of the year, guys who you expect to be the heart and soul of what you're doing as a program this year. And I think at times some of those guys were passive. I think they could have done more to bring some higher levels of energy and tenacity on the defensive end, doing more to crash both the offensive and defensive glass and just fight. I mean, you need to locate a guy, hit them, box out, and pull down the rebound. Of course, it's easier said than done against a physical team like Arizona, who really at this point might be the most physical team in the country, between both what they have in the backcourt with Jaden Bradley, who's tough as nails, as well as what they got in the front court between Krivas, Pete, and Toby Walker. I just think that if they play that way the entirety of the game on Wednesday night, then they're in a lot better position. I think if they do that, I mean, you play that way the whole game and then you go on the run that they did, or you keep it close in the first half and you go on the run that they did in the second, then you're in a lot better of a position to win that basketball game Wednesday night. And of course, that's something that is going to give more than enough material for the coaching staff to rip the guys apart in the film sessions about and address it going into this game on Sunday against Bryant and hopefully at the Garden on Black Friday against Illinois. I want to talk about Jaden Bradley. Again, this is someone that I addressed in the preview episode that I did going into this game. I continue to think he doesn't get the respect he deserves. I mean, right now, on this very day, Jaden Bradley might be a first-team All-American. Of course, we got to see if he can continue to play at the level that he has to start the year. But I don't know that there's a better closer in the sport right now than Jaden Bradley. He's right up there, probably just behind Braden Smith in terms of best guards in the country right now. I mean, just the job he does defensively, the job he does offensively, time and time again, knocking down just really, really tough shots. The one mid-range jump shot where he pulled up and hit over Eric Reibel, where I thought Eric Reibel had a great contest on it, got both arms up with the long wingspan, of course, being 7 foot. Jaden Bradley proceeds to knock it down and really just give Arizona a lot of breathing room in the late stretches of the game Wednesday night. So, I would have liked to see, I think, Silas Demery open up on Jaden Bradley rather than solo ball. I was a little confused by that matchup decision there, but I'm sure the coaching staff at UConn knows a lot better than me, and there were definitely reasons that they decided to do that. I can understand you wanted Silas maybe to be the guy who chases Braden Burries and Anthony Delorso off of staggers, the pin downs to limit the three-point attempts, which they were able to do. I think Arizona only attempted 8 threes in this game, only making 2, but this was definitely a game won in the paint, and they were kind of in the mindset that, hey, we're going to win in the paint and we're going to force UConn to try to beat us at our game. And that's what they did, which is what I'll get into now. Overall, I just think you got to give Tommy Lloyd a lot of credit because it was an outstanding game plan defensively from which he applied to play against UConn in this game. I think it was really similar to what we saw out of Creighton the last couple of years when they had Ryan Kalkbrenner, where you got a guy who's 7 feet plus tall. And, of course, Ryan was, I believe, 7'2". Mo Crevis is, I think, also 7'1". He might be 7'1". I forget off the top of my head how tall he is. Nonetheless, he's a 7-footer. What Creighton does is they want to funnel you into the paint to force you to take a tough shot over Ryan Kalkbrenner. Arizona did a very similar thing where they're chasing guys over the ball screens, going over the top of them, over the screens, both on and off the ball, off the staggers, off the DHOs, off the misdirections. And they're forcing you to have to either, one, challenge Mo Crevis at the rim, which you're probably not going to have a high chance of converting on just considering he's a 7-footer, or 2, taking a tough 10 to 15 foot jump shot from the mid range, or taking a tough floater, which there were instances where guys hit them like solo ball. I think he hit a couple. I want to say 2 to 3 of those mid range jumpers he was able to knock down. Silas Demery also, I believe, got 1 or 2 floaters to go, as well as 1 or 2 mid range jumpers. But really, I think Arizona's whole mindset was we're going to eliminate the 3-point shot from UConn's arsenal and really force them to beat us at our own game and winning inside. And of course, that's not what happened, and Arizona was able to take advantage of that. I think next thing I kind of want to touch on was solo ball really needs to get going. It is starting to get slightly concerned now. I still deep down believe he's too good of a shooter for this cold streak to continue. I think what I tend to notice over the last couple games is when he's shooting from 3, he's almost in a way looking to foul bait. I don't know if that's the right phrasing to use there, but he tends to kick his legs out. I think there were several times on Wednesday night which he could have gotten called for an offensive foul just because of the leg kick. And he's, again, kind of trying to just foul bait in a way and get to the line and get the 3 free throws. Where last year, when he was as good as he was from behind the 3-point line, shooting at close to 41%, I believe it was last year, he's just rising up and shooting. He's got the long wingspan. He's a great athlete, so he can elevate on his shot. He just needs to go back to doing that. Focus on hitting the shot. Don't worry so much about drawing the foul. And I think that's something that maybe the coaching staff probably picked up on as well, and they're going to talk to him about it. And hopefully we'll get a game pretty soon that solo ball really shows up, because for UConn to be the national championship contender, the Final Four contender that we believe them to be, then solo ball has to be a guy who can knock down shots from 3, who can be a secondary ball handler at times, which is something that I honestly think I was maybe a little early in jumping the gun and thinking he was kind of at that point where maybe we haven't seen it against the high major opponents between BYU and now Arizona. But he needs to be a big scorer for this team. He needs to be an option, a viable option offensively. And I do hope that, going into the games against Bryan and Illinois, he'll kind of get back on track to being the shooter that we all know him to be. Next thing I want to hit on is Silas Demery. I think Silas Demery had opportunities to be a little bit more aggressive than what we saw on Wednesday night. I think a lot of that is because, again, he's still figuring things out. It's really tough. I've talked about this to an extent on this podcast for over the last 2 seasons now, that it's so hard for first-year transfer guards, freshmen, to pick up the UConn offensive system so much, specifically for point guards. T. struggled in his first year with UConn and trying to decide exactly what the coaching staff wants out of him and when. That's the role Silas Demery's in right now, where, yes, we saw in BYU what he can be. When it's winning time, that's a guy you can give the ball to with 7 seconds left on the clock and go ask him to make a play, go get you a bucket. I think, again, there was opportunities for him to be able to take guys one-on-one, but maybe he kind of passed it up in more so of a laid-back mindset where when he was playing at Georgia, he would take a lot of shots off the dribble, and that's been scaled back drastically since coming to UConn. I think in a way that's kind of been coached out of him just because it's not what UConn needs him to do all the time. Of course, there's times where it is ideal for him to be able to go and create off the dribble and make shots that way. And I think for right now, it's a matter of him figuring out when to do that. And I think it's going to come. I know he's trying to prove to the staff, the fans, and his teammates that he's a capable passer. And I got to say, he's still passed the ball quite well on Wednesday night. I think he's still making the right reads. It's just really a matter of him trying to figure out, okay, when do I need to be aggressive and be in score first mindset? When do I need to be the quarterback for this team and be a passer? And I think he's going to get there. It's just going to take time. There's going to be growing pains, as there always is with UConn point guards. But I got a lot of faith in Silas, and I know that he's going to have a couple games where we're going to see the aggressive version of him that can go out and get 20 to 25 points. I think another area where UConn struggled offensively was Alex Karaban. I think in a lot of ways, he almost thinks too much, especially when he's faced with a matchup like Ivan Karchenkov. I think that in my preview episode, I thought that Arizona is going to come out and have Koa Pete guard Alex Karaban, and that's obviously not what happened. They had Ivan Karchenkov guarding AK, who's more of a natural three, and I think caused a lot of problems for AK and just being able to get open off the screens, the pin downs, running off the staggers. And I think that in a way it almost took him out of the game. I think mentally kind of checked him out, just him not being able to get free, not being able to kind of get things going. I think he passed up maybe 1 or 2 looks in that game on Wednesday night and kind of forced some tough takes to the basket rather than just taking the three. He did knock down one really huge one to put UConn to cut the deficit to 3 when UConn was going on the run in the second half. But I definitely think that in a way it kind of neutralized AK, and that's definitely something that I wasn't really expecting. Again, a lot of credit has to go to Arizona and Tommy Lloyd here with just the game planning, the second half adjustments that he rolled out coming out of the locker room going into the second half. Just a lot of credit you need to give to that Arizona program. I think another thing which stuck out to me was that Koa Pete not guarding AK and guarding Jalen Stewart, I think opened things up for Stewart to have a really big first half. UConn is down big going into the halftime break if Stewart doesn't have the half that he did. He had finished with 10 points. I think he made some really tough winning plays on the defensive end of the basketball. He dove for loose balls. He forced a backcourt violation on Arizona's end. And again, he knocked down some really key jumpers. I think 2 threes, 1 to 2 middies that were just really important in keeping UConn in that game when they kind of couldn't get things going offensively during that slow start. So a lot of credit goes to Stewart there. I thought we got good contributions from Jaden Ross as well. He knocked down that 3 during the run that UConn went on to erase that 13-point deficit in the second half. I thought he defended well. And definitely, I think those 2 guys, again, you really want to get a game where both of them are playing really well for the entirety of it. And I'm hoping that is to come very soon. Now, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me in this game was Eric Ryba. Eric Ryba, he needs to hit free throws. He needs to finish a little bit more efficiently around the basket. But I think this game was huge for him. He led the team in scoring with 15 points. He had moments defensively, although he did kind of, struggle on the glass. I'd like to see him, again, being able to find a guy, locate him, make contact, box out, pull down the defensive rebound, pull down an offensive rebound. But at the same time, I still think that what we saw out of Eric in big moments offensively was huge. What he did in being able to roll the basket, finish a couple tough shots, especially that and one to start the game where he's essentially falling down, gets fouled on the flagrant and knocks down the shot that he just, was kind of just a Hail Mary prayer that he threw up on the backboard and just luckily went in. That would just, it's good to see him convert a shot of that difficulty. It's huge for your confidence. Seeing him knock down the 2 threes in that game was definitely big as well. I know he missed a couple others. I think at times he was kind of indecisive if he really wanted to pull the trigger or not. I know 1 or 2 of them were to beat the shot clock, so kind of just a grenade that he was throwing and he had to put it up. But overall, I think just him having these moments where he's hitting big shots, where he's getting fired up after knocking that 3 to tie the game, where he's disrupting people defensively. Of course, he still has room to grow on that end of the basketball for sure, but just having moments spurted throughout in a top 5 game, an environment like what was Gamble Pavilion on Wednesday night, I think is just so important for the above the shoulders aspect of a player's game. And I think the experience he's getting now is so invaluable going into the later months of the year where you have a tandem now at center between Terrace Reed when he's healthy and Eric Ryba. That's 2 guys who can compete, and there's not going to be a crazy fall off from Terrace to Eric and when the team is 100% healthy. And it's definitely so important to have that going into March. We know that the two back-to-back national championship teams under Dan Hurley, had great tandems at center between Sonogo and Klingon, and then Klingon and Samson Johnson the following year. I think the opportunity for them to be that something similar to that is definitely there. And I think seeing Eric perform the way he did in this game was definitely really, really encouraging for what he can be as the season goes on, and potentially if he returns for another year in STORRS the next season. But I think another guy that really stuck out to me before I kind of just get to my overall takeaway from this game is Malachi. I thought the minutes we got on Malachi off the bench were really strong in the second half. He was one of the catalysts for that run and being able to erase the 13-point deficit in the game. And I think the energy he showed defensively in guarding Jaden Bradley, the passes he made, I think he totaled 6 assists in the game. I forget off the top of my head once again. He made a huge shot to beat the shot clock really late in the game that gave UConn the lead, and what I thought was maybe going to be enough for UConn to win this game. Following another stop, just how they were defending through that stretch, of course, didn't happen. But I think what he's showing is he's proven that he can hopefully continue to fill the role of being that Hassan Diarra for this roster this year, where he's coming off the bench for Tristan Newton in the 2 years before he was a starting point guard last season. So I think it was definitely great to see Malachi do that. I would like to see him be a little bit smarter on some of his drives. I think there was one in transition where he didn't have any numbers. Probably should have pulled it back out, kind of forced going to the basket, and it led to a turnover. I think he's got to knock down the one open three that he had, or at one point in the game in the second half, which really would have helped. But overall, I think if he can continue to be a change of pace guard, defend at a high level, play make for others, then that's going to be really, really key for this team going forward. So overall, I think this game shows a lot about this team's character. To only lose by 4 to a top 5 team in the country, when you're down 2 stars in Braylon Mullins and Terrace Reed, and to face a deficit the way you did, being down 13 points in the second half, and to show fight, to show desperation at the point of the game, and to be able to come back and at one point give your chance a really good chance to win that game, I think that says a lot about the fight that this team could potentially have, and how the ceiling is still really, really high. I still firmly believe that this UConn team can be a national championship contender. It just really comes down to getting guys healthy. You really just need to get Braylon back. You need to get Terrace back, just because Terrace is going to open things up offensively, being a post threat. UConn's going to be a lot better of a defensive team with Terrace on the floor. Their opponent's field goal percentage is, I want to say, nearly 20 points lower than what it is when he's not on the floor. So that's going to help a lot. He's proven to be fairly disciplined so far in the paint and not fouling guys when he's protecting the rim. So I think getting that back is just going to be huge. Braylon, of course, kind of in a way has to grow up quick. When he comes back, he's going to be a really big focal point in the offense, and just being able to knock down shots and be one of the best shooters in the country, the way he was kind of advertised as coming out of high school as a 5-star, top 15 type kid. So I definitely think, the opportunity is there for both those guys. And if they play up to the level that we believe they can, open things up for other guys. Just because of one loss, I understand it's at home, but it was a 4-point loss where you shoot the ball terribly from the line. You can't get stops on the defensive end for most of the game. You get out rebounded by 20 and you're down 2 starters and you still almost win the game. I definitely think that's something that you have to applaud UConn for. And you still give a lot of credit to Arizona as well. But overall, I think this shows a lot about the team's fight. I still think you really do need someone to emerge as kind of like that Andre Jackson or Cam Spencer guy, be that dog. I think it could be Malachi. I think Silas has a chance to be that. I liked what I saw out of him fighting for the loose ball against Koa Pete at one point where they had to be separated. Just seeing that type of tenacity and fight out of a guy, I think, is really important. You got to get Solo back on track. You got to get AK back on track as well. And I think bottom line is you got to get guys healthy. But I think that pretty much takes care of what I was able to take away from this Arizona game. Now getting into my preview for the game against Illinois at MSG on Black Friday. I definitely think that this is a game that's going to be tough to win without Terrace Reed, as I mentioned earlier in the video. Illinois got a lot of size. They got bigs, Tomislav Ivizic, Savonimir Ivizic. Those two, both over 7 feet tall. Tomislav is kind of dealing with an injury. He played limitedly in Illinois' loss to Alabama, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's back and ready and in the starting lineup for this game against UConn. I can definitely see Illinois trying to run a similar defensive game plan as to what Arizona did, where, again, you try to funnel guys in towards your 7-footer, force them to take the tough shots they're probably not comfortable taking, the mid-range 10 to 15 footers, the floaters over size. It's tough to hit that over length. And that's something that Illinois might try to do. They have one really, really good on-ball defender in Kylan Boswell. I expect him to probably take the assignment of Silas Demery. Illinois has a lot of options on the perimeter. They got Kylan Boswell, who's averaging close to 18 points a game. Andrej Stojakovic has played really, really well as of late. He had 26 points, I believe, against Alabama, and that's going to be a tough assignment for whoever takes him. I would probably expect one of the combination of Jalen Stewart and Jaden Ross to take him on the defensive end. I expect Silas Demery to open up on Kylan Boswell. The Avizage brother, whichever one of the two is starting. Of course, Tomislav, if he's healthy. Terrace Reed is also healthy. He'll take that assignment. AK is going to have his hands full guarding David Mirkovic. David Mirkovic has been one of the best freshmen in the country. Mirkovic is, of course, an international prospect who's coming over to play for Brad Underwood this year. And he's been every bit that Underwoods could have asked him to be. He's had a couple 2020 games now, and he can do a lot. Playmaking out of the post. He can shoot the three. He can take guys off the dribble. That's really essentially a lot of these guys on Illinois can put the ball on the floor and go get to the cup, shoot the tray ball. Keenan Wagler has been also really, really good for Illinois to start the year. Freshman who's averaging close to 16 points. They also have the dimension of a lot of different guys who could come in and contribute off the bench between Ben Humrickhouse, Mihajlo Petrovic, who just recently got some action in the Alabama game. And I honestly felt the Illinois offense really got going when Petrovic was on the floor. I think he tallied 5 to 6 assists in that game. So it's going to be a challenge for UConn defensively for sure. I think this game has to be won on the defensive end of the ball. If you can get Terrace back, I don't think we're going to see Mullins in this game. Nonetheless, I think Terrace is going to open things up offensively where there is the threat that you have to worry about of Terrace in the paint and just being able to score. And that's going to hopefully open things up for Silas to take guys one-on-one, for the shooters to get going solo, Airband, Stewart, Jaden Ross when he's in the game. And I think it's going to be a really tough battle. There's definitely more of an emphasis on winning these upcoming non-conference games now that you drop one to Arizona. And I think it's definitely going to be a game that UConn's going to have a lot to prove in, and hopefully they will. But overall, I think this is going to take care of everything I have on this episode today. Don't give up on UConn after one loss. It was a tough loss against who some might argue as the number one team in the country and a team that might be ranked number one in the country on Monday to come. We'll see what happens in the games that have yet to be played this weekend. But overall, UConn, they're still on the right track, I believe. You just got to get guys healthy, and you got to go out and chase number 7. But until next episode, I'll see you all next time.